what's going on, y'all? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And you're about to watch a little OTB LSU.
We're going to give you all the latest, greatest between LSU football, baseball, women's basketball, softball, and everything in between.
Bottom line, if you want to talk Tigers, keep it locked, subscribe, like it, and we hope you enjoy.
I want to talk LSU versus Baylor in the Texas Bowl. It is coming up tomorrow, 2:30 kickoff out there in Houston, and depending on where you look, you will get a little bit different lines. But for the most part right now, the Baylor Bears are favored by 3.5. And you've seen the money kind of trend to them a lot here in the coming weeks. And it makes a lot of sense. Baylor comes into this game red hot. So if you haven't followed Baylor a lot this year, they started the season 2-4. And if you remember, Dave Aranda had a disappointing season last year. A lot of people at the halfway point of this year said Aranda's not going to survive this. They're going to move on after the year. They've rattled off 6 straight wins, so they come into this game riding a 6-game winning streak. In terms of quarterbacks in the Big 12, you look at the teams that were at the top of the conference, right? Everybody's going to look at Shedeur Sanders. They're going to look at Sam Leavitt from Arizona State. You're going to look at Jake Retzlaff with BYU. Sawyer Robertson has quietly been really, really good this season. He's completing around 62% of his passes, 2,600 yards, 26 touchdowns, only 7 turnovers. Now, you may look at that and say, well, hell, that's a big mismatch for the LSU defense. They're probably cooked. There is some good news for LSU. What has LSU's biggest weakness been this year? It's been shutting down a opposing quarterback that can take off and run. Sawyer Robertson, about 250 yards rushing on the entire season. He is not much of a runner, at least not from the likes of, Jalen Milroe, Diego Pavia, Marcel Reed, guys like that you really, really struggled against. They do have quite the running game, though. It's just not going to come from the quarterback spot. They have a 2-headed monster running back with Bryson Washington and Dalton Pendergast. Those 2 guys are going to give you problems because you have been susceptible to giving up big plays in the running game. We've seen it all year long. Now, on the other side of things, their defense has been pretty hit and miss, but Dave Aranda is going to have them ready for this game. He's a great defensive mind. He's had multiple weeks to prepare for this game, and he's going against his old team. He really wants to win this game. So, while their defense may be up and down, I would imagine you're going to get the best possible version of a Baylor Bears defense in this game. LSU comes into this game a little bit different than Baylor. They had that awful 3-game losing streak in the middle of the season where you drop games to A&M, Alabama, and Florida back-to-back weeks. But you won your last 2 SEC games. You beat Vanderbilt at home. You take down Oklahoma. So you're feeling good for the most part as well. LSU's had a ton of opt-outs, though. If you look at the defensive side of the ball, though, you're still pretty well put together. As far as defense, Sage Ryan's not going to be there. JVR Suggs is not going to be there. And reports are that Major Burns may not play in this bowl game as well. Outside of those 3 guys, you're pretty healthy for the most part, and you have most of your guys. Your big issue on defense is going to be depth. For example, when you look at the safety spot, that's obviously the biggest hole on your team. And you can say, okay, well, Javian Toviano has been moved to safety. You have Deshaun Spears. You still have Joel Rogers. What are they going to do with him? But behind those guys, there's not a ton of depth. So you may have your top 2 or 3 guys that you're going to roll out there and see what they can do. Not a ton behind them. And if Javian Toviano has to play that star position in place of a absent Major Burns, then you're really in trouble at the safety spot. I think the key to this game for me is going to be, can the D-line shut down the running back duo of Washington and Pendergast? If you can do that, you might be okay. Again, Sawyer Robertson has been very solid throwing the football all year long. But make no mistake about it, this is a run-first team. You go look, both of these guys get a lot of carries. It's pretty much a 50-50 split between them. They've both been excellent. On the offensive side of the ball is where I'm really worried about LSU. I think this game's going to be tight either way. But offensively, no Kyron Lacey, no Mason Taylor. You still have a lot of weapons, though. You have Xavier Thomas. You have Aaron Anderson. You have Jelani Watkins. Everybody's been excited to see what he can do. You have receivers for the most part on the outside. All of your backs are available. Josh Williams is playing in this game. Caden Durham's going to be playing in this game. Caleb Jackson is available, even though he hasn't had a ton of run. As of right now, he is still on this football team. Your biggest issue is the offensive line. You're going to be without Will Campbell, Emory Jones, and Garrett Dellinger. Those guys have been staples on your offensive line now for 3 years. A couple weeks ago, everyone was wondering, what is Emory Jones going to do? He was kind of the key to keeping this offensive line together, not just for this game, but for next season. He ultimately announced he's not going to play in this game. He's preparing for the NFL draft. Video had surfaced, reports had surfaced out of bowl practice. Here's your starting lineup right now in bowl practice from left to right on the offensive line. Tyree Adams, left tackle. Paul Mabinga, left guard. DJ Chester at center. Then you have Bo Bordelon at right guard. Miles Frazier moves from right guard to right tackle. So your most experienced guy is Miles Frazier, but he's not even playing the position that he's been starting at this school for the past 2 years. DJ Chester's obviously there, but he's had an up and down season to begin with. And then Paul Mabinga has played in 4 games. Now, he's graded out a little bit higher in each game. His worst game was A&M. He got a little bit better against Alabama and so on and so forth. But he's still not one of those guys where you're like, he's a plug-and-play guy. We can count on him to make plays down in and down out. He's still leaving a lot to be desired. So when you take into consideration the opt-outs for LSU, the makeshift offensive line that, I mean, you have 2 starters from this season on, and one of them is playing out of position. You look at Baylor, for the most part, they're very limited on their number of opt-outs. The 2-headed monster in Bryson Washington and Dawson Pendergast. Sawyer Robertson, who, as I mentioned, 2,600 yards, 26 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, quietly been one of the better and more efficient quarterbacks in the Big 12, which is a conference that actually features a lot of really good quarterbacks. As up and down as that conference has been, a lot of people have a lot of opinions on whether or not that is still a quote-unquote elite power conference in college football. They've been really good at the quarterback position, pretty much top to bottom in that league. Sawyer Robertson has been one of the better ones. I think this is going to be a back and forth game. Now, as far as who I want to pick in this game, you know, Baylor comes into this game, the 6-game winning streak. LSU comes in, they've won 2 in a row, but they're not far removed from that awful 3-game skid that tanked your entire season. For that reason, I want to lean Baylor, right? They're the hotter team. They have less opt-outs. They have a lot more depth coming into this game. Both established quarterbacks. Nussmeier's obviously playing for LSU. Sawyer Robertson for Baylor. But when I look at LSU, sometimes a positive trend doesn't even have to be on the field. And I'll explain what I mean. You were on that 3-game skid. You beat Vanderbilt, you beat Oklahoma, but neither of them were elite football teams this year. When you lost out on Bryce Underwood, it seemed like, for most LSU fans, this is the lowest of the low. It can't possibly get any worse. Something happened with LSU, whether it was Brian Kelly, whether it was the coaching staff as a whole, whether it was the donors that are donating money for NIL and your recruiting budget. A switch was flipped after that Bryce Underwood decommit. What did you do? You went and got every single player you were targeting for National Signing Day during that early signing period. You have dominated in the transfer portal. You're ranked number 1 or number 2, depending on which recruiting service you look at, but you are without a doubt a top 2 transfer portal class. You have the number 7 recruiting class in the country. It just seems like LSU's done a lot of winning recently, and not even necessarily on the field. So while Baylor comes in, they're hot. You're on a 2-game winning streak as well. And this program is certainly trending in the right direction. So regardless of the outcome of this bowl game, it does not take away from all the positives that has happened the last month. right? You're still going to go into the offseason with a returning quarterback, which is the biggest thing you can do in the SEC. You still have Caden Durham back. You still have a lot of weapons. Offensive line is going to be an issue, but I trust this coaching staff to get it right. I trust Brian Kelly. I trust Brad Davis to evaluate guys. You brought in a lot of guys, whether it's transfer portal or in high school recruiting, that you think could potentially play right away. A lot like a Will Campbell and an Emory Jones did. I desperately want to pick LSU to win this game because I think that, again, I don't think losing this game is going to necessarily take away from the momentum you have going into the offseason, but a win in this game really establishes that this program is headed into the right direction. You win your last 2 SEC games, you dominate high school recruiting, you dominate in the transfer portal, and you get a win over a really good Baylor football team in the bowl game. You head into the offseason. You don't have that bad taste in your mouth. You're feeling good going into spring football. However, with all the opt-outs, with the injuries, Baylor coming into this game, having a lot of depth, I think this game is going to come down to depth. As far as your frontline starters go, outside of the offensive line for LSU, I think you're okay. Offensive line's a big question mark, but I just mentioned it on defense. Most of your starters are back. You just don't have a ton of depth behind them. Baylor, on the other hand, they pretty much have their full team available in this game. So for that reason, unfortunately, I am going to pick the Baylor Bears to win this game. I think it's going to be close. So I'm thinking, 35-31, 37-34, somewhere along those lines. But I do think that the Baylor Bears are going to win this game. However, I hope that I am wrong, not just from someone who's a fan of LSU who covers his team all the time, but I really think that all the positive momentum you've built up in recruiting and the transfer portal, paired with a bowl win in the Texas Bowl over a good team like Baylor, can really catapult you into spring and really get you feeling good about the 2025 season. So the game obviously coming up tomorrow, 2:30 kickoff out there in Houston. LSU Tigers, Baylor Bears doing battle. I am picking Baylor to win this game in a close one, but we'll see what happens.
Wow, Jake, what incredible takes.
I mean, those guys, they're just the best.
I think so. And if you think so, again, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications when we post every single day here on OTB LSU.